Hey everybody, welcome to Hearing God in First Peter chapter 1. We get to begin a brand new book of the Bible today, which was written by the Apostle Peter. It's a circular letter written to churches who were undergoing persecution. And so Peter writes to encourage them in their suffering, to help them to persevere to the very end. And so there's going to be a lot of inspiring words that are applicable to our lives today as well as we undergo various types of suffering as well. And I chose verses 10 through 12 as my highlight for my Hear journal in First Peter chapter 1. And Peter writes, concerning this salvation, the prophets who prophesied about the grace that was to be yours searched and inquired carefully, inquiring what person or time the Spirit of Christ in them was indicating when he predicted the sufferings of Christ and the subsequent glories. It was revealed to them that they were serving not themselves but you in the things that have now been announced to you through those who preach the good news to you by the Holy Spirit sent from heaven, things into which angels long to look. And I chose these verses because it helps us to kind of put ourselves in the sandals of those Old Testament prophets. They spoke boldly regarding the things to come, regarding the coming of the Christ, regarding the Messiah. And because of their bold proclamations, they underwent incredible persecution. They suffered greatly. And yet, kind of the sadness of it all in some ways was that they themselves did not see the fulfillment of these prophecies. That would not come until much, much later. And so the prophets were not around themselves to see the fulfillment of what it was that they were sharing would ultimately come. And they served and suffered for future generations. And that's kind of what I want to highlight in this. These Old Testament prophets served and suffered for future generations. And that is a concept that I believe we are to follow in terms of their example. We ourselves are to serve and suffer for future generations. And yet, I don't see a lot of that in our society today. We don't have much of a vision or appetite for this. And two very practical ways that I see this is in our treatment of the planet. We don't really live with future generations in mind. The national debt. We don't really live with future generations in mind. And I'm not in any way suggesting that these are easy dilemmas to solve, but yet I don't see a great appetite. I look at the national debt in particular. It's just not something we talk about, not something we prioritize. We just kind of go about our business with our heads in the sand, assuming that, it's going to somehow be okay. Well, it's not going to be okay. We might escape the ramifications and the consequences of that debt, but at some point, our children, grandchildren, great grandchildren are going to have to deal with what we have left behind for them because we don't have a vision or an appetite to do what needs to be done about that. And so I confess I live this way. Churches that decline and die often do so because they exist to serve themselves in that present generation rather than looking ahead to future generations. And what a tragedy that is, because the very nature of discipleship itself is the transference of the faith from one generation to another. It's the passing of the baton. And if that baton is not passed, if it's dropped, there are significant consequences for that happening. And so, again, what a tragedy it is to see when churches they decline, ultimately die, largely because they just don't have an appetite for serving and suffering for future generations. It's all about themselves until they don't exist anymore. And then what do you know? The church doesn't exist anymore either. And so we are called to be players in this kind of intergenerational discipleship, which intentionally looks ahead to future generations and passes that baton from one to another. We are all called to participate in this. It's not just for the pastor, the youth pastor, the children's director. We are all called to be a part of this, to serve and to suffer for the transmission of the gospel for future generations, the way that those Old Testament prophets did. And so my response, my prayer for myself and for you, for all of us together, Father, give us a greater vision beyond ourselves and for our own generation. Help us to live in light of the future and to effectively pass the baton of faith to those who come behind us so that we do all that we can to make them a success. And so I don't know exactly what that means for you today. What would it mean for you to take a next step in living with future generations in mind? What does that look like for you financially? What does that look like for you in terms of your spiritual legacy and what it is that you are leaving behind? Um, our days are numbered. I love the seasons and how we're moving into spring, but those seasons are again a reminder of just that the clock is ticking. There's an urgency to this, and so I'd encourage you this day. We can get kind of overwhelmed when we think, "Hey, I don't know what to do about the national debt, so I'm not doing anything about anything regarding future generations." Start small. Start small today and think about what it is that you can do to serve and to suffer for future generations the way that those Old Testament prophets did. And so that's kind of a weighty thing for us to consider today, but I just appreciated that concept in First Peter chapter 1. And I look forward to joining you soon for First Peter chapter 2.